Hello and welcome to this edition of Doing Business in Rwanda. We are at the Kigali Convention Center for the YouthConnekt Summit 2017. Of course, this is a partnership between the United Nations Development Program. We're looking at Rwanda Development Board and so many other partners from the public and the private sector with one agenda in mind: the youth. We're looking at a continent with an average age of 19.5 years. What is being done by many of the stakeholders, the governments, to make sure that the youth are included in the country's future? Not forgetting the continent at large. That's the conversation this edition. And remember, you can be a part of the conversation via Twitter at DBI Rwanda. I'm Arnold Segawa. Welcome, Doing Business in Rwanda.
Over 2,500 delegates graced the YouthConnekt Africa Summit 2017, held in Kigali, to discuss matters around African youth development. Youth account for over 60% of all of Africa's unemployed, on a continent with over 200 million of our population between the age bracket of 16 to 24. Africa is yet to see the narrative change with the introduction of the YouthConnekt Hub, fund and app.
The fear today is when we build IT solutions and mobile applications, the fear today is that we build new tools that cut jobs. Right. Whereas us, we are building tools, solutions, platforms that really make people work together and generate jobs. The idea of having this mobile application for the youth in Africa is to facilitate access to youth to a platform where the youth can share ideas, can share their views, their visions, their dreams, can have access to, for example, scholarships through different institutions that are ready to support youth in Africa, looking for investors to support them. It can be through crowdfunding, it can be for venture capitalists, it can be for many other ways how people can access the platform in order to see what youth are proposing in Africa, but also how to support youth. It's also a platform that is there to guide, where mentors all around Africa can guide youth on how to develop some of their ideas, how to innovate, what are the processes they have to think of.
China has been Africa's #1 trade partner since dethroning the United States of America in 2009. This being attributed to a new need to secure long-term energy supplies to sustain her industrial growth. Although criticized much by the West, the trade partnership has and is benefiting both Africa and China.
I seek funding everywhere. And I tried in Europe, I tried in the UK, I tried in America, and I couldn't get funding for these projects that we were doing. But then the Chinese gave me the credit line that I needed to even get my business across. I always felt like the Africans and the Chinese had the one thing in common, and that was our culture. Our culture always steered the direction in where we go. If you look at 25 years ago, China was in the same position that Africa is in today. But then when you look at how the people decided to make China first, closed everything just to revamp and figure out how do we move forward so that we can compete with the outside world.
I've been doing e-commerce for 18 years in China, and my job is to helping small guys and looking for entrepreneurs and using internet to empower the small business to sell things globally. And this is what I found very interesting in Africa today, is very much like what we experienced in the past 10 years in China. And people say, when I started my business 18 years ago, Jack, you don't have money, you don't have a relationship, China doesn't have enough credit card system, you don't have a delivery companies, you have nothing. Why you can build up the e-commerce company? You think about, crazy. But I said, guys, yes, China did not have delivery services. Let's build it. China does not have online payment. Let's build it. China does not have this kind of called a trust system. Let's build it. But we will never succeed in 1 year or 2 years. We will wait and fight and continue to do it every day. For 10 years later, we have the chance.
Few years after the Rwandan genocide against the Tutsi, the country embraced a new model of economic development to build a global network of powerful friends to attract private investment and market the Rwanda brand abroad. This and more have ensured the country's fast development.
If Jack Ma and his team can be successful, 80% of the young people can be successful. If Rwanda can make from such a bad disaster in 1994 to today, one of the best countries in Africa. If you have an idea, very important to say, can I make it in 10 years? Think about it, work on it. I bet you have a better chance than other people.
To have an idea of how to engage and win the respect of Chinese entrepreneurs. That at a time when only Africa and Asia are the main champions of multilateralism today, we want to find links that grow these opportunities for Africa. And if you, the young people, create a constituency of Africa's future, politicians are opportunists. They look for the longest queue to jump to the front.
We've leapfrogged from landlines to cell phones. Who would ever thought that an African would be able to support and afford a cell phone? If you ask the basic data right now, they would tell you that the average person in Africa makes $2 a week. So how are they supporting a cell phone bill? The data cannot be correct to the way we live. Our culture is different. We can't mimic our culture according to everyone else's culture because we live differently. So that data can't be accurate to our data, which means the potential is in Africa. The only thing that's missing is participation and infrastructure.
African policymakers have always looked at means of easing cross-border operations, free trade, and movement of people and labor mobility on the continent as a way to create markets for our products and boost intra-Africa trade. This hasn't really been achieved, even though countries like Rwanda are issuing visas on entry to Africans.
How do we, on one hand, talk about integration, at the same time we deny people to move freely from one place to another? How does it work out? Just doesn't make sense. But it's not just that, it's also business. People can't do business cross borders. They can't trade. And that also means people will not invest. We won't be able to invest in one another in Africa. We should be doing trade with each other. We should be investing in and with each other. We should be having free movement of people and whatever they produce. So, to begin with, we must address this problem.
When we have leaders, such as President Kagame, having conversations with other leaders of his mindset and get them to start thinking on those lines and just create treaties to come together. And at that moment, when Africa decides to unite and really unite, I guess it will be that point where everyone will look at us as the potential superpower of tomorrow.
The Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, commonly known as AGOA, aimed at helping African states further efforts to open their economies and build free markets. But following a complaint by the United States, interests about an East Africa ban on imports of used clothing, the United States commenced reviews on trade benefits to the East Africa Community countries like Rwanda, Uganda, and Tanzania since the introduction of initiatives of buying locally made goods.
You know what they're saying? People of East Africa make clothes, new clothes, and sell them to America. We Americans will wear them. When we die, our families will export them to you, and that's what you will wear. Politically and even morally, it's unconscionable to put it as a condition of market access that people must buy your second-hand clothes. And I think the leadership of East Africa is right in increasing duty on second-hand clothes as it expands the local consumption of locally made textiles. This is a battle of the process of industrializing your countries.
The challenges that African countries are faced with are quite numerous. From having a higher number of unemployed youth on the backdrop of relatively fewer employment opportunities, illiteracy, poverty, and the list goes on. At the YouthConnekt Summit 2017, youth leaders discussed on how to get more youth around development and having a say, yet again, calling on them to act accordingly.
You can never wake up a person who is pretending to be asleep. We have the constituency of people who know where we need to go, but they are not helping to define the priorities of the dialogue between government and enterprise. The second problem is slightly different and more challenging. You know, literacy about what needs to be done is just like all types of literacy. You know, those who most need it are the ones who least understand how important it is to them. You have a politics that is building a dynamic of popularly getting people to be on your side without being consistent with what is necessary for this continent.
We are running youth activities, but we don't put the young people front. We claim to say we are doing this for the youth, but at the end of the day, it turns out not to be the youth. It turns out to be the elder generation, which is taking all over everything and not putting young people front. So we want to say, if African Union want to talk the youth, take the young people, put them in the African Union and say, this is what we are doing for you. How many startups are there outside, and this is the way we are going to finance you.
YouthConnekt 2017 ending on a high, with numerous stakeholders and of course policymakers coming to the table asking the Rwandan government to have YouthConnekt roll out across the rest of Africa. I'm Arnold Sagawa. That's where we leave it for this edition of Doing Business in Rwanda. If you have any feedback, make sure to just drop us an email. That's dbir@abn360.com, or just even easier, just tweet us at DBI Rwanda. That's where we'll leave it for this edition. From the entire Doing Business in Rwanda team, thanks for watching.